I just want to have a conversation. That's what I
Sure.
want. And
Okay.
you've given us so much grist for the mill. There it is.
You did.
So that's the book on
Love it. Yep.
audio, and we'll ask people to pick it up. The subtitle is "The Nine Habits of Extreme Productivity," and that's actually a semi-technical term, which we'll also get to. It's
Mhm.
not just a superlative.
It is
It's
not.
there's a
It is
meaning
not.
behind that term.
That's right.
But let's launch in on you and Mike. So this is, you are not the author, you're the co-author of this book, and your
Mhm.
co-author is somebody that you that you know well. Um, Tell me about that, or I think tell folks who will listen to this and pick that book up what that means to write a book with your partner.
Sure, absolutely. So, my husband, Mike Schultz, and myself, we wrote the book together, and that was a very deliberate decision because in the book we share our very personal story. So we came upon Not Today and the 9 Habits of Extreme Productivity, not in a quest or search for how to be more productive, but because our life circumstances dictated that to us. So our son, Ari, he was born in 2012 with a congenital heart defect. Now, the first 4 years of his life, we lived in and out of the hospital. He had 3 major open heart surgeries. And at the same time, we were trying to launch a new business together. Now, my history, I grew up in a family business. My parents owned and operated a motel in vacation land of Maine in the United States. And so I had that model of a family business, of growing up in a family where parents worked together and ran a business together. And, flash forward 15 years later, and here I am running a business with my husband, but under incredibly stressful circumstances, dealing with a very critically ill child. Now, in 2016, Ari was diagnosed in heart failure, and we were told that he needed a heart transplant. At the time, we had one other daughter. We had a younger daughter. She was a year younger than Ari, and I was 9 months pregnant with our third child. So here we are, we're being told our oldest son needs a heart transplant. He's going to have to live in the hospital until he gets that transplant. That could be up to a year. We have a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm 9 months pregnant. And we're trying to get a business off the ground. So we had to figure out, how do you juggle all of these things? What is most important to us? How do we manage our time in a way that we can be there for our sick child? We can be there for our well child. We can be there for our newborn baby. And we can be there to get this business off the ground, because guess what? If this business fails, bye-bye health insurance. So we had a lot going on, and we had to figure out, how do you work under those circumstances and under incredible stress? And that is really where these 9 habits formed, because we tried a lot of different things. We read a lot about, how do you focus? How do you be productive? How do you get the most done? We tried all these things. We're like, well, that's not really working for us. So we started trying other things, and then these habits just started to solidify. We started sharing them with each other. We started sharing them with other people in our business. They started training some of our clients on these things, and they're like, wow, this is really working. And so back to your question of, that's the why we wrote the book together, because we really created this together. We went through this together. I look at Not Today as not just a business book, but it's a self-help book. It's a life book. It's the reason we wrote it is to change people's lives and make it so they can live better lives without having to go through the stress, the trauma, everything that we went through. And we had to learn really, really hard lessons going through that. Maybe they don't have to go through all of that to make a change right now.
Well, it's a very tender story. It's a remarkable thing for you guys to wear that on your sleeve the way you do throughout. It's also beautifully written, so you guys are skilled writers. And for the uninitiated who think that they will just get a straight pure business book, I think they have the option if they want that. I wouldn't recommend it, but there are sections that are quite personal that either illustrate the things that you're talking about, or they serve as a segue into topics that otherwise might just seem like a dry framework, or some hot tips. It's like, well, can't you just get it off a blog? These all hang together as a series, and are illustrated from, like you've just said now, exceptional set of conditions, like a real crucible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciated that, and I thought it kind of brought these ideas to life. I think it said something else, Erica, which I just want to note, because in an era where you could get robots to write things for you, or where you could get a ghost writer to write things for you, or you could sort of amalgamate things from public source.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the book from folks whose, I don't think you're like elbow deep in the muck and the mire of time management things. I think it's more like right up to the shoulder deep
Mm-hmm.
in various efforts to try things,
Mm-hmm.
and then like you mentioned, take them out. There's something else too. I think you must be a special pair, in that you're wired to go through a crucible like that,
Mm-hmm.
together. But there's some other things too, like you're both black belts, and not both black belts in one thing,
Yes.
but in two things, which makes me think there's probably even more under there. I'm probably not digging deep enough. But there's substance in that, right? Martial arts often serve as kind of a metaphor for many other things. There's something kind of deeply
Yes.
true about them.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about people who are together, like you and Mike, who can write, but who also have black belts in jujitsu and karate.
Well, Mike actually introduced me to both jujitsu and karate. So early on, when we first started working together, before we were a couple, Mike would leave the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays a little bit early, going to this class. So I said to him, "Hey, where are you going on these Tuesdays and Thursdays nights?" And he says, "Well, I'm a black belt and a sensei in karate and jujitsu, but this is the class that I attend, not the class that I teach." And I said, "Well, that's really interesting. I've always been very curious about anything in sports. Multi-sport athlete. I ski raced in college. I played basketball, I played tennis, I played soccer, I played softball. You give me a ball, you give me a sport, give me a racket, whatever it is, and I'm in." So I said, "Well, that sounds really interesting. I graduated college recently. I don't have a lot of hobbies going on. Do you mind if I come join a class now and just check it out?" And I just immediately fell in love. So the style of karate and jujitsu we practiced was a Japanese style, and it's very much based on self-defense. And the very first defense we learn is don't get into the fight, diffuse the situation. And I love that, because I think people think, oh, you have a black belt in karate, someone's going to be aggressive towards you, you're going to immediately use that. I'm saying, no, I'm going to use this first.
Yes. Yeah.
So I fell in love and, progressed through my career, became a black belt in karate, became a black belt in jujitsu. Now, unfortunately, over the last few years, we have not kept up with our practice. We're still, very in touch with a lot of our friends who are, but when you have children and go through life, you have to let some things go along the way. That's not to say at some point I might get back into it. But I will say there's a lot of, that mental toughness that I learned. There's a
Yes.
lot of body control that I learned that has served me in other ways. So I picked up golf 3 years ago, and I really have a nod towards my karate training that has allowed me to pick up golf so quickly because I know how to control my body.
Right. Yes. You also, it was a very small passing reference, but you referenced the karate katas when you're talking about flow.
Mhm.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think when you've seen flow in one place, suddenly you know to seek it out in another place. So if you're a knowledge economy worker, like so many of us are, it's actually quite helpful that maybe your hands and feet and your spine have experienced flow somewhere.
Mhm.
So that you might be able to do that in an editing process or in a brainstorming process or something else.
Right. And it's all about training, right? You're training yourself to do these things, whether it's flow or in the book, we talk about manufacturing motivation, right? So many people think that motivation is innate, right? So Kevin, you're either motivated or you're not motivated. Well,
Yes.
it isn't like that. It is like a muscle. You can train yourself and apply certain habits, hacks, strategies, whatever you want to call it, to make yourself more motivated. So it's like a muscle. You can build it over time. So all of that, right? Training yourself to be in flow, training yourself to be motivated, training yourself to be disciplined with your time. It is all connected.
It is all connected is a super like single sentence to say to as an entry point for folks into this book. It would be the kind of book where possibly you could jump in at chapter 7 and work your way, hit it thither. I think it works well in the order that it's presented. Still, if you'll indulge me, can we jump in on time?
Absolutely.
Both the subject matter and the acronym, time, TIME. This is just great. I really like this. And can I just burden you to like present it to, as if I've never heard it before? It's super.
Yes. So I'm so glad you bring that up because time is probably my favorite part of the book and the piece that I am most passionate about. You and I haven't talked about this. We didn't plan this. So I'm really glad that you bring that piece up. So when we talk about time, and there's 3 keys that we share that hang the 9 habits together. The first is manufacture motivation. The second is control your time. And the third is to execute in the zone. So when we talk about time, we use time as an acronym, TIME. And these are what we call the levels of time. And everything you do, literally down to the minute and the second of your day, every single thing you do falls into one of these 4 categories. So what are they? T stands for treasure time. So this is time doing things that you hold dear. Karate, golf, spending time with my family, traveling around the world, visiting Australia. These are things I love to do. This is my treasure time. It fills my cup. It makes me happy. I stands for investment time. So this is time you spend working towards your goals. Now, there's a very important distinction here about goals, which we can dig into in a little bit, but your goals are not meeting my quota this month, meeting my billable hours this year. Your goals, when we talk about your goals, we talk about your big picture. What do you want to do with your life? What is your purpose? What is your meaning? And why is that your purpose and your meaning? And we have a whole framework that breaks down how you can go from there to how you can tie that to what you're doing today. So your investment time is working on those activities today that are ultimately going to put you in a position to reach your goals, to realize your why. Now, M is mandatory time. And mandatory time is really, really interesting because I would say in most of our training programs, when I coach people, when I talk to people about this, it is the most controversial area that we really have to dig into because so many people say, well, I have to do this. Really, you have to do that? So when we talk about mandatory time, it's those things that you think you have to do, but that they're not treasure time, they're not investment time, but you still think you have to do them, like mowing the lawn, running those reports for your boss, doing this research, right? So every one of us, and we, with the mandatory time, what you want to do, you want to either minimize it, so shrink it down, outsource it, and that's where I get a lot of resistance of, do you have to be the one doing that? Really, do you? Right?
Yeah.
There was a study that said people who get takeout once a week are happier in their lives than those who have to make dinner every night. Why is that? Because dinner's a mandatory activity. We have to make dinner for our families. But getting takeout one night a week can make you happier. So the last category of time is empty time. So this is time that we waste, right? So scrolling through Facebook, getting likes on Instagram, whatever it is that you do that you know is time you're wasting. Now, that is not to say that you put a broad blanket over empty time. For example, I might want to go binge watch Ted Lasso because I need some good laugh out loud comedy. Okay. But after watching 3 episodes of Ted Lasso in a row, do I really need to turn on that 4th? Am I getting as much enjoyment out of that 4th as I got out of the first, or should I just shut it off right now? So maybe the first 3 are treasured time I needed to fill that tank, but the 4th, now it's kind of empty time here. And I need to be mindful of that. I need to be deliberate, and I need to stop myself. And the great thing about this model and why I get so excited about it is if you literally just start thinking through this time lens of everything you're doing, if you become more mindful with the activities you're doing every single day, every single minute, you can change your life. Because how you spend your time is how you spend your life.
There are a ton of small things I want to touch on there. I'm just like upset that I'm not going to get to them all. But so personally, I'm not having the conversation with you just for my personal benefit, but I still want I still want some of it, please. Tracking your time closely.
Yes.
I mean, with detail, with care to attention, etc. That's difficult for me. I think that's probably difficult for a lot of folks. And
Yes.
I think they probably feel like they're disobeying Schrodinger because they're going, wait a minute, the day that I normally would spend is not the same as the day that I would pretend I'm normally spending while I'm writing the whole damn time. This is how I'm spending my time. It's like, should I write now I'm writing or what? Like, this is not going to be an ordinary day. But I think you addressed that. Like, what do you make of that problem?
Yes, absolutely. And, when it comes to tracking your time, it's an activity that can be eye-opening. I think that everyone should do it, but you don't do it every day, right? You pick 2 days, 2 ordinary days. And yes, is there going to be a psychological effect where you're going to make different decisions? You're going to do things a little bit differently? Absolutely. But when you look at how you're spending your time, when you do that reflection exercise, you can be mindful of that, right? And you can say, okay, listen, I know I jumped into this activity really quickly because I didn't want to show 5 minutes worth of website browsing in between, okay, I really said that this meeting started at 9 o'clock, but the 3 attendees were 5 minutes late and I really wasted that time in between. I could have answered an email during that time instead, right? So as long as you hold yourself honest when you're reflecting upon it, I think that is good enough. Also, there's all sorts of, I'm a tactical person. I like to write things down. You'll see I'll have my pen. I'll probably take some notes during this interview. But other people, they're really into the apps, and there's apps. You can turn the timer on, turn the timer off. You can integrate it with your computer. There's all sorts of different ways you can do it. You find what's working for you, but also do it for 2 days. You don't need to do it for a week. Do it for 2 days and see what happens. Reflect upon your experience. and hold yourself honest. You're doing this because you want to make a change, not because you're trying to impress someone else. So take that piece out of it and look through the lens of, listen, I want to make a change here. I want to be honest with myself. I know it's not going to be perfect. Nothing ever is perfect. That's totally fine, but you're going to get the broad strokes, and that is good enough.
When you work with clients and they encounter this framework and you sort of take them into the probably terrifying but valuable world of looking at these four, what do you see in terms of mislabeling? Because I think I could easily share with you time that maybe I think is mandatory.
Yep.
But when my father looks at it on my behalf, he goes, no, that's what you're talking about right there. That's treasure. That's what that is. And then maybe if I consult my wife on it, she goes, no, that's investment time. And so it could, a single activity could get mislabeled or relabeled, or it could even transition with the years from one to the other, although the activity hasn't changed.
Yes.
Sorry, Erica, that's a horrible question. It was like multiple questions at once.
I love this question.
I think you know where I'm headed with it, though.
I
which
do.
is, what do you do about that?
Yeah, I love this question, because here's the deal. What you label as treasured, what you label as investment, what you label as mandatory, it's going to be different for every single person. Because what is investment time for you? Again, this goes back to understanding what are your goals, what is your why, and that's going to be different for everyone. So maybe your wife, your partner, your father, with your relationships, maybe they have certain relational goals. And then it becomes, okay, are our relational goals aligned? Right? Which that's an important conversation to have. And then you can look at these activities through that lens. 1. 2, the reason I said mandatory activities are so interesting is because there's an opportunity with mandatory, we talked about outsourcing. You can also flip the script on mandatory activities and change the narrative around them to align them to a goal, which then they become investment activities, or change something you're doing during that activity so it becomes treasured. Say you need to mow the lawn. Okay, that's mandatory. You know what? We can't find a lawn company. We can't afford a lawn company. I don't want to get a lawn company, whatever your reasoning is. Okay, what could you do then? On the lawnmower, I'm going to listen to this podcast. I'm going to listen to an audiobook. I'm going to listen to a recording of a Zoom meeting I had this week that I need to re-listen to and process.
Yes.
I'm going to listen to this research that I need to do, right? So you can convert those mandatory activities and those mandatory time into something treasured, into an investment activity. And then you change the narrative around it. So I think I share this example in the book, but for me, making kids lunches, okay?
Yeah.
The worst mandatory activity. I'm a working mom. I run my own company. I'm on calls all day. I get home, I need to make dinner. I got to sit with the kids, hear about their day. In the midst of getting them bathed in their pajamas, reading them stories. Oh, right. I also have to make school lunch for them. I got to pull the apples out and cut the apples up. Hated it. I went through this exercise, reevaluated my goals. One of my goals is teaching my children to live a healthy lifestyle. It's a part of that, eating healthy lunches. So here are my options with mandatory activity. I can let them get school lunch. Here's what I know about their particular school lunch. They can get pizza or sugary cereal every day. Now, does that align with my goal? No, it does not. So I'm not going to do that. However, simply by aligning it with my goal, I change the narrative around it. So I go from drudgery of having to make my kids lunches and I'm exhausted to all of a sudden I'm opening the fridge, I'm pulling out the ham to make a ham sandwich, and I'm thinking, I'm teaching my children healthy eating habits right now. and your motivation changes around it, your mindset changes around it. It's not drudgery anymore. It's, I'm doing something great. So you can look at, and this is where the reflection piece comes in, right? You can look at any of these activities you're doing and think about them as, can I outsource it? Can I minimize it, as in not do it? Or can I flip the script on this? Does it align with any of my goals? And what's the narrative I'm telling myself? And we talk about, positive self-talk. What's the narrative I'm telling myself around this that can change my motivation and my mindset here?
Back to the beautiful metaphors that come out of martial arts. Kata, I think the first time you do it when you're 5 or whatever, almost always is going to drop into mandatory. I mean, for the true cynics, maybe it drops into empty. Right. But it was quite interesting to me, once again, that you had tagged that to flow. You didn't tag sort of sparring, or something else, but something that was rote. It's muscle memory, and yet that can be the channel by which you hit this wonderful kind of transcendent moment. That would be reflected in meditative practices, in many religious traditions, and sometimes, occasionally, I think even in workday.
Absolutely.
So then you get a jump. You can get a jump into treasure time, even from that mandatory / empty zone.
Or, why are you doing the kata? So kata is a pre-arranged fight. That's what kata is.
Right.
So when you're doing it, you are not just doing a series of muscle memory activities, block, punch, right? You are envisioning an actual fight going on. You are preparing yourself mentally and physically for when these things happen. And, to your point about sparring, we will do katas with the incoming attackers. So this is what is actually going on in this kata. So it isn't just this prearranged, activity that you're doing. Again, it's what is the lens in which you're looking at this activity through. If you're just thinking about it as block, punch, what's my next move? Yeah, that's pretty mandatory. That's pretty empty. That's pretty rote. If you're looking at it of, wow, I am preparing my body. I am preparing my mental self. I will have the automaticity of when someone is attacking me like this to know what to do. That's very empowering.
I just want to hit empty time again for a second. There's one of the authors that we interviewed a couple of books ago was talking about the creative process, and this documented portion of the creative process called incubation.
Yes.
Incubation is the sort of researcher's technical way of explaining why we get great ideas while we're driving, in the shower, or the next morning after we wake up and have slept on something. And so it classically occurs during what you've taxonomized or labeled as empty time. And I think what they've discovered is that if you don't have that, then you won't get incubation. If you just work hard, if you're like, I'm going to stare at the whiteboard full of ideas more intensely and for more hours, you're only prolonging the moment of illumination.
Yes.
So what do you make of that given empty time?
Sure. So I think with empty time, and we say eliminate empty time, but also make the note, you're never going to get to zero. You don't want to get to zero. Yeah. You don't want to get to zero for those reasons you just said. Okay. But also it would be impossible to get to zero. And in fact, we will schedule meetings specifically with no agenda, simply to uncover those types of ideas that you were just talking about, right? So I want to have no agenda. I just want to step back and be like, how's it going? And you can get so much done in that time. You can uncover great ideas. And I don't consider that empty time. So again, it goes back to what are your definitions of your time, right? And like things like the shower, sure, that you're always going to shower. You're not going to be listening to a podcast in the shower every morning. So there are opportunities for that. I'm not saying you want to take that out. And I'm an advocate for meetings with no agendas, because I think you come up with really, really great ideas during those meetings.
There was one other fellow who really changed our team's perspective. That was Dr. Matthew Walker, who writes this beautiful book on sleep. And I think we can thank him for taking our view of empty time and putting sleep squarely there, and instead realizing, no, actually there's nothing wrong with a good full night's sleep. In pure mercenary terms, like, I want to get some amazing things done, like, all right, go to sleep earlier. So that there's maybe a sidebar in that E.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, like, sleep is an investment activity. I do not operate well on little sleep. We talk about in the book, we talk about productive stamina. You can't have productive stamina without good sleep. Also, think about it from an evolutionary perspective. We as humans have evolved so much, and yet we still need 8 hours of sleep. That is incredible. That is a huge statement towards how important sleep is.
Yeah. What were you doing those years, those months and years when you were in the hospital? So you and Mike had this incredible, difficult scenario, which you gave us some insight into. But one of the things that you touch on inside the book, and which I wanted to ask you more about, is you're at a location that is just horrible for interruptions, for a lack of comfort, for basic comfortable aesthetics, right? Like, even the paint on the walls isn't a nice color. And when you get to something like this, like your categories of time, the two of you were achieving a lot, and a lot of that time in that horrible environment, physical environment of a public hospital. So can you just tie, I think what I'm asking, Erica, is, with that as the example, can you talk about the physical environment and how it associates here?
Absolutely. So when we were in the hospital, as you said, Kevin, it is a distraction nightmare, right?
Yeah.
And especially, it's a children's hospital, it's a teaching hospital. There is a never-ending stream of doctors, of residents, of fellows, of physical therapy, of occupational therapy, social work coming in, making sure our child is engaged and having things to do during the day. Also, we have a 5-year-old living in a hospital room, okay? Imagine, we have to come up with really creative ways to keep him entertained, because otherwise he sits in his bed and watches the iPad all day long. That's not healthy for him. It's not healthy for us. It's not healthy for anyone. So it's a constant stream of people. It's the beeps. He's hooked up to monitors. It's the medications. So we had very, very small windows of time where we could actually focus on work. And what I found is I would have every afternoon a dedicated 1.5 hours in the afternoon that I would have to work. Now, the first few months, what would I do? I'd open up my laptop. Oh, 50 new emails. Okay, got to respond to these. Boom, 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 boom. Before I know it, 1.5 hours done. Did I actually get anything done? No, not really. Did I feel good? No, I felt terrible because I wasn't getting anything done. I was letting my team down. I felt personally responsible. I wasn't pushing any projects forward. So I was talking to Mike and I said, well, you're in the same scenario here. You go and you seem to be getting a lot done. What are you doing? He says, well, I'm identifying what is the most important thing I can get done today. I'm putting that in my calendar. I'm putting on headphones. And I'm essentially saying to people, I am not available right now. So I said, that's interesting. So identify your most important thing. We call that your greatest impact activity. What is the one thing, if you get it done today, is going to have the greatest impact on you reaching your goals and having the best results. Identify that one thing. 2, put it in your calendar. So I identify, you know what? Okay, I really need to write this white paper. Okay, put it in my calendar. Get started writing this white paper. Hour and a half to get it done. 3, when it comes time, signal, do not disturb. Okay, never ending stream of doctors, all sorts of alarms going off. My phone going crazy. How's Ari feeling today? What's going on? What do you guys need? Do you have dinner? I have Lexi. I'm taking her here. I'm taking her there. I have the baby. You know, never ending stream of communications coming at me. Turn my phone off, put on noise canceling headphones, signaling to anyone who enters the room, do not bother me, do not disturb. And then when it comes time to actually focus, we use a strategy we call time sprinting. So you know you have this dedicated amount of time, you know what you want to do. When you sit down to do it, what do? We pull up an internet browser and we read the news. Are we focusing on what we're supposed to be focusing on? Absolutely not. Okay. So time sprinting. And what this is you take a 20-minute chunk of time. You say, for 20 minutes, I'm going to focus on this one activity, nothing else. I'm not going to respond to emails, not going to respond to Slack, not going to pick up my phone. I'm going to focus intensely on this one activity. Put a timer on, counting up, not counting down. We'll get to why. It's very important. Counting up. Say 3, 2, 1, go, and start on it immediately. Before you know it, you're going to want to open that web browser. You're going to want to pick up your phone, but you're going to say to yourself, no, I'm not going to do that. You're not going to allow yourself to do that. And what you do, you were talking earlier about getting into the zone during kata. Well, what you can do with this time sprinting is you can train yourself to get into the zone with your work. And this is why I say 20 minutes on, counting up, because once you're in the zone, say it takes you 7 minutes to get into the zone, the last thing you want is a timer going off at 20 minutes, pulling you out of the zone. Okay. So yes. It's really the combination of those things. I went from answering emails for an hour and a half, feeling really crappy about what I was getting done, to all of a sudden, an hour and a half, boom, I wrote the introduction and the outline to that white paper. I feel great. I got done what I wanted to get done. I'm making progress. I'm making progress to my goal, towards my goals, which, by the way, is very motivating. And I feel more energized. Mm-hmm. It's not a drag. It's not a drudgery. You know, I can at least say this one aspect of my life, I'm doing really freaking good in, given the circumstances.
What is going on there? Because if you consider the you that's at the end of the 20 minutes without the alarm, mm-hmm. and the you that was 2 seconds before you said 3, 2, 1, go, mm-hmm. It's like they're different people. I mean, the wiring is so entrenched. You're in such a cloud. Maybe they're 2 separate clouds, right? But at the end of that 20 minutes, of course, frequently what happens is you say, of all the things I could do in the world right now, what I want to do is more of what I'm doing. You know, yes. I'm writing and I'm at my stride, or I'm designing, or I'm thinking, or I'm, you know, doing the thing I'm doing, which like 19 minutes and 59 seconds ago was nearly the last thing that I wanted to do. Like all I wanted to do was eat some gummy bears and like watch Ted Lasso. I think there's something kind of remarkable, maybe almost metaphysical going on there, mm-hmm. in that the hack isn't the work, or it isn't the mm-hmm. lighting or something else. It's literally you turned yourself into a new creature just in that window of time.
Yes. And I think that, so, you know, 5 seconds before you hit that 20-minute timer, what's going on? Your inner voice is speaking to you with 300 to 1,000 words per minute, right? It's a constant stream of, here's my to-do list. You know, I got to get this done at work. I got to order cleats. I need to make dinner. Oh, you know what? We ran out of milk this morning. I really need to stop on the way home to do that. Oh, did the Amazon order arrive yet? Oh, my husband needs to be here to pick up this child there, right? So it is and honestly, like your inner voice is usually pretty mean about it too. It's not even talking to you in such a nice way. It's always, you're not doing enough. You should have done this. Why didn't you set this up for them in that way? So what you're able to do when you say, I'm going to block all of that out, right? Thank you. I hear you. I'll talk to you later. For the next 20 minutes, I'm going to focus on this one task. That's it. And trust me, your inner voice, it's going to try to interrupt you. And when it does, when it says, you need to go order cleats because Lexi's soccer starts, tomorrow at 5, you know what you do? You don't hop on Amazon and order the cleats. Yeah, write it down. Okay. You say, thank you for that. It's written down. I don't have the cognitive load anymore of carrying that and remembering that because it's written down. I'm going to go back and continue what I was working on. Now, what it also does, we were talking about getting in the zone and flow. And a lot of times, flow in the zone is talked about with athletes or with artists or with writers. And it's when you're in that state of mind, you can actually be 5 times more productive in that state of mind, in the state of flow, than if you were just working in a typical, distracted kind of way. So that hour and a half that I would say, I'm only going to focus on this one activity, 5x that. I'm working a full day in an hour and a half. Great.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel good about that. Why would you want to do more of that?
There's an awesome little section there, which for those who will hear that and think like, oh, that's interesting. There's an awesome little section where you you do some calculations. And so the idea of like, well, maybe you have to make some investments in order to, do the quantum leap into that flow state. But if you get there and you're 5x, there's no problem that you gave up half the time just getting there.
Absolutely, and it's hard. Okay. So if you try to, I don't know if you've tried time sprinting, Kevin, I would certainly encourage you to. It's hard to do at first. You have to train yourself to do it because there are so many distractions. We live in an incredibly distracted world these days. It is just incredible. But if you can really train yourself to zone those things out, to focus on one activity, like we have seen massive productivity gains, not just in individuals, but across teams, right? Say you're a team leader listening to this. Say you have 50 lawyers on your team. Imagine what that could do for those 50 people. It just multiplies.
Well, I'll share with you something interesting. I'm sitting at my father's desk right now. Like this is a home that my family lived in for 30 years. And there's this little guy here. So we're on the topic of time sprinting. I had interesting parents. This little guy right there is my dad's little like totem that he sticks out to ensure his time sprints. So it's like a physical way that he says time sprint is on now. It's funny when you were talking about it, I was like, that's, oh my God, like the little climber dude is actually like right there. So he sticks that out. And then it's like you can't do anything. The little guy, it represents the fact that you've gone into this zone and you'll leave. When you leave, that guy goes back.
I love that. And I'm sure growing up with your father, you also saw that as a signal of do not disturb me right now. I'm in the zone, right? So
well, to be fair, we saw the closed door. The closed door.
Well, that works too.
And my mom, who was a great writer, picked up something from Hemingway, which was that her 20 minutes was that you would commit to write a sharp pencil down to like a dull nub. Wow. And this was a woman who achieved the nearly unthinkable of writing every day of her life for 77 years. I mean, as soon as she could write, which isn't it's like that. You'd think that's certainly not technically true, except for that we've got a room filled wall to wall with journals. So
that's beautiful. I love that.
They had this sort of old time hacks when there were no apps, there was no phone with a timer on it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I love that. And what was interesting about us, so we came up with all of this given our life circumstance where we were. Yeah. However, who I am. I'm a research geek. I
Okay.
am evidence-based. I am, okay, well, that worked for me. That doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone. So we decided to test these habits, and we have a global study that more than 5,000 people have participated in
Yeah.
that have validated these habits and
Wow.
validated these hacks. So it's not just, oh, we figured this out and it worked for us and now we're sharing it with the world. You know, we wanted to make sure, does this actually work? And probably the most interesting piece, and what surprised me the most when we did this study, was that these habits, they not only lead to being more productive, they also lead to, or people who have these habits are also more likely to be satisfied with their job. They're more likely to be top performers, and they're more likely to be happier. And that was the big one. I said, wow, you take those 4 things together, what a great life you could have. You're productive, you're happy with your job, you're a top performer, and you're productive in your life. Like, have we unlocked the code to something here?
Yeah, I'm so pleased you got to this, because it was one thing I wanted to make sure we touched on, the XPs. It's the hint is in the subtitle of the book. But you and Mike aren't just authors who wrote a cool book. You run Rain Group, and you work with all these clients, and they're not chumps, right? These clients are serious folks already. But of those serious folks, there's an upper crust, and of that upper crust, there's a thin, really shiny, crust. And these are XPs. Can you just say a couple of words about XPs? You were actually just saying a couple of words about XPs, but I think folks will find this fascinating, because XPs among us will go, yeah, she's describing me. And other folks are probably on that aspirational cusp where actually there's 1 or 2 things that would probably make the jump for them.
Sure. So what we found in our study is the extremely productive group. So these are people who employ these habits, but also rate themselves more highly and say, yes, I am extremely productive in my work. And then when we looked at how they spend their time, how much time they're spending on investment activities, how much time they're spending on treasured activities compared to those mandatory and empty activities, huge differences. I'm talking about 2 hours a day. That's 10 hours in a typical week that these people who say they're extremely productive are spending on their investment activities. So activities that are going to allow them to achieve their goals, right? Compared to everyone else. And remind you, only 18% of people are in this extremely productive group. That's 82% of people who have at least 2 hours a day right now that they could be spending on their investment activities. 1. 2, these extremely productive people, what we thought we would find is that, okay, they're spending all their time on their investment activities so they can take treasured time later. That was not the case. They take more treasured time now along with their investment time.
Right.
So how do you do that? We all only have 24 hours in our day. They're deliberate with how they spend their time. And here's the other thing. We looked at those who rated themselves as extremely productive, 5 out of 5, and those who rated themselves productive, 4 out of 5. And oftentimes in studies like this, they'll group the top 2 groups, right? And they call them, the most productive people. We found huge differences in those who call themselves productive versus extremely productive. So even if you're sitting on this call, you say, yeah, I'm pretty productive, I get a lot done. The gaps are massive to make the jump from a 4 out of 5 to a 5 out of 5.
You mentioned briefly that that Neil Rackham had caught wind of your data and spoke in quite a complimentary way to you about it. Can you tell me about that exchange?
Sure. It was actually my husband's exchange, so I wasn't there, so I can only speak from a third
take credit. Just take that credit.
Perspective. But he he was very complimentary in the fact that a lot of people make these grand statements, right? You need to do this, and they make them because it's a catchy headline. But when you dig into their data, what they've done is kind of twist and interpret and take that data to write this storyline that and unfortunately I'm forgetting the name of it, that he calls it, but it's headline worthy, right? And it doesn't actually work. Whereas what we've done is what he referred to as healthcare, where we are looking at the whole body of research. We're looking at the people, and we're just presenting it in a way that we're not trying to put a spin on it, right? We don't have any particular horse in this race. We don't need catchy headlines. It just is what it is. And so, his perspective was he very much appreciated that look, the research that backs it up, and the fact that we're not out here just trying to make catchy headlines, right? We're out here doing, actual healthcare, in that we want to change people's lives, not just give them a catchy headline.
Well, if you'll suffer a shameless compliment from me as well, we read a lot of nonfiction business books as a team and interview authors, about one a week on average. And there's scope creep in many books, business books. And so I was sort of like, oh no, I'm going to read Not Today, and suddenly it's going to be like sales tips coming out on chapter 9, and then there's going to be like how to live a better spiritual existence in chapter 3 or whatever. And it doesn't happen. You've executed some interesting discipline. I suspect that's because it's the spring that comes out of your research and experimentation, and you said you're a research nerd. So I think that's probably what's happened, is at the same time that we get a string of different but all related ideas that hang together, there also isn't scope creep in this particular book.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate that. And, honestly, we wrote this book simply because we want to help others. And, I really hope that is what comes through. And we went through it with a fine-tooth comb and said, anything here that, isn't core to really helping and also really easy to apply, right? We wanted to make sure it was very accessible. So you could open up chapter 7 and be like, yeah, I can try a few of these hacks, but also step back and say, wow, this is a very refined model, and I can see how all of these pieces fit together.
Yeah. There's something else, I think, for your fellow research nerds, which is there are many touches on other things. I'm looking at my notes here, like the Hawthorne effect. There's a lot of leads for those who are inclined to go and like double click and go deeper into these things. Or we're talking about flow. So Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, that's a deep rabbit hole one could go down, and others. So
yeah, I think each of these, there's a huge body of research around. We could only touch on the iceberg, but if you want to go down that rabbit hole, there is so much there behind all of it.
What we intend to do, and I'd like you to just sort of correct this where maybe I get it wrong, Erica. I think we'll just direct people to the book, but also to Rain Group, because there's two things. I mean, you're authors, but you're running this business, and I think if folks are really practically minded, they want to get into this themselves more deeply, it's probably better just to engage you guys as a service provider. Is there anywhere else you'd like to direct folks to see how you write and think and what you're up to?
No, I mean, I encourage you to check out Rain Group. Definitely subscribe to the newsletter there. We have weekly value-added tips, research, productivity is a part of what we do. You'll see it's much more broadly a part of really sales training is what we do. However, in order for sales training to work, you need to change people's habits. And that is a missing piece of most training, whether it's sales training, leadership training, whatever it is, when you actually want to make a change, it's getting into the nitty gritty of how are you going to apply this every day? What are you going to change that you're from what you're doing now to what you want to be doing? And what are the very specific steps? How are you going to do that? And coming up with a plan. And that's where our 9 habits of extreme productivity fit into the greater training picture, if you will. And we found that when we layer on this 9 habits training, the organizations, we're typically working with a sales organization, it's hugely impactful. In fact, several of our clients come back and say, I want all my professionals to go through just this 9 habits training. You know, only my sales organization needs these sales skills. Everyone in my organization can benefit from these habits.
Well, that is super. I didn't overtly share this with you, although I think maybe you know it. Our job, the reason that Sage exists in the world, is to help clients organize their internal academies. That's a thing that a lot of organizations would love to have, but it feels like they got to wait till they have 5,000 people before they can take a step toward that.
Right.
And our job is to make sure that they don't have to wait until they have 5,000 people before they can do so. And I see massive value in both lines of work, training people to be great at the honorable craft that is sales, and also just training them to respect and better handle their time.
Absolutely.
Erica, I wish we were doing this over a dinner table and I got another hour, but we aren't. That is the hour. Will you just say a really kind word of thanks on our behalf to Mike as well?
Thank you.
And to you. Among all the treasure, investment, mandatory and empty time you have, making some for us to just kind of fill out the details of your book is great. It's been
Kevin,
super.
Thank you for this opportunity. And honestly, I view conversations like this as treasured time because I just want to get the message out there. I want to help more people. That's my why. That's my purpose. That's what I feel like I'm here to do, and also to carry my son Ari with me, because he was such an incredible soul. So it's a privilege to be able to have this conversation with you and to hopefully touch your audience in a way.
Well, super. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.